The setup here and installation of integration services for SQL Server 2012, really, really easy stuff. There's not really that many things that you have to concern yourself with. I think that this being a total intro course, like, we're only allocating, say, an hour of time completely to what is integration services, what is its role, how do you set it up, and how do you perform the basics. We only have time to cover a couple of different scenarios. There are additional scenarios, but we have to cover those in course 173, which is the Integration Services 2012 course. So let me just jump in, and I'm going to cover a couple of scenarios here in this course. We're going to talk about, in this video, how to do a fresh install of SQL Server 2012 with, or I'll say that includes the integration services, okay? Now that means that we're working with a computer that doesn't have the SQL Server components, and we need to add those to the system. We want to maybe also install the database engine, or we want to also install analysis services on the same machine, okay? And then situation number 2 is how to add SSIS to an existing SQL Server 2012 install. Okay? So yesterday, for example, let's just play. You came in and you installed analysis services because we went through our how to install analysis services video a couple of videos back, right? And so you said, hey, I'm going to go install it. And then today you realize, hey, I didn't install integration services and I need it. How do I add it? Okay, this is really, really easy, okay? It's really, really super simple. So let's go through. I have mounted the DVD, the media right here, so I'm going to just go ahead and double click. It's going to go through a couple of rules at the beginning that no matter what you're doing, have to be gone through here. It's going to check for things like reboots and such like that. Before that, I do have to make the decision up here. Let me scroll over. Sorry, I don't want to make you dizzy. I'm in the installation page. I guess that's what they call it, the page here. And I'm going to choose this top link. Why? Because this fits my number 1 and number 2. I'm either going to do a new SQL Server installation, non-clustered. That's what the standalone means. Okay? Or I'm going to add, number 2, features to an existing installation. Okay? I'm sure you understand clustering, kind of an advanced thing. We don't have time to really cover that in this course. We cover that in our high availability course, but for integration services here, we can't really play with it in the hour that we have. All right, so top one we go. It's running through its rule check now, making sure we don't have some of the beta components of SQL Server installed, that we don't require a reboot on the machine. Basics that you run through every single time that you go through and do an install. If you need the system requirements, the documentation has that information. So let's go ahead and go close this out. All right, let's wait for it. Come on. Okay, it's looking for updates. No updates found. Okay, it's right now scanning to see if there are more product updates. I should have unchecked the box in the previous screen. We talked a little bit about how to do somewhat of a slipstreaming here. I should have not done that because it's making things go a little bit longer. Well, that took a little while to go through and run these rules here, but we did pass everything. It is giving me the warning, hey, you have Windows Firewall Service enabled. And yes, I do. So it's not an error. It's just telling me, hey, make sure you open the ports, or, this may cause problems for your users. Okay. So now what is our option? What is it that we want to do? Okay. Down in the bottom, it shows us what has already been installed. Okay. And I sure do wish this was a better screen. We can see that we have multiple instances here. MS SQL Server, the default instance, and then one called SSAS Tabular. I mean, we did that back in Chapter 15 when we installed Tabular, a SQL Server analysis services in tabular mode. Okay? And if we take a look right here under Features, this is where we can actually see what features had been previously chosen. And gosh, it sure would be nice to be able to fully expand all that and see all the things that are there, and unfortunately, we don't really get the option. However, I have already installed integration services. Okay, so it's actually in this list. We just can't really get a full listing. I can put it over here. But you see down here, IS. Okay, what is IS going to be? Integration services, right? So here you go. These are under, now this is unique. This is under shared components. Okay, so here's a big difference between integration services and the other three key parts of SQL Server. The database engine, let's just kind of make some notes here. The database engine can have up to 50 instances per machine, per computer. Okay? Analysis services can have multiple instances. I'll just say multiple instances off the top of my head. I can't remember what the number is for the number of instances. I just happened to be looking at features by addition this morning for somebody had written in and asked a specific question. And that's the only reason I know about the database engine 50 instances. It's not like I memorize all that and keep it in my head for 5 versions or something. Reporting services can have multiple instances. Okay, meaning multiple installs on the same computer. Integration services cannot. There is only one. Okay, you cannot have multiple instances of integration services. There is one integration services service, and it's simply the listener and manages everything through the pipeline that comes through to request information to connect to the integration services catalog. Okay, so this is a little bit different from the previous installations that we've seen. So that's going to affect my screens later when I go through and choose my feature selection. You see that's going to be what we do over here. We're not quite there yet. I got to enter the product key and agree to the EULA and all those fun things. Okay, so it's on this page. If you're coming in here doing a fresh install, this part is going to be empty. This is going to be nothing, right? I've been working with the same image here since we began the course, so I have these installations from the previous, chapter 3 when we did the installation of the database engine, and chapter 15 with analysis services. But on a fresh install, this will be blank, and so you have your choice. So up at the top, let's just continue now. We get our choices to perform a new installation of SQL Server 2012. Okay, this is your fresh install. If you don't have SQL Server, or if you want to add another instance, this is what you choose. Okay, maybe you have a default instance of the database engine. Okay, I know that because the instance ID, there you go, that's our database engine there, and SQL engine right there. Maybe I want to add a named instance. This is the option I would choose. Okay, this is also when I do a fresh install on a clean machine, meaning that it has no SQL Server 2012 components already, then this is the option I would use to choose to install integration services. Okay? Now, add features to an existing instance of SQL Server 2012. I can pick my instance and go from there. Okay, but just remember, integration services is not an instance. Okay, we can still add features though to previously installed instances, and that's where we would go if we wanted to install on an existing instance. Okay, so pick your choice here, make your option. We'll say perform a new installation. I'm going to go through and put the product key in here, and I'll see you here on the license terms page. So I respond to the EULA, although they changed it. It's no longer end user licensing agreement. It's license terms now, but it's the same thing, right? Accept the license terms, say next. Okay, what choice? Okay, we've talked about this a couple of different times. SQL Server feature installation. Okay, notice if I want to install a particular feature, hey, there's our feature that we want to install. Okay, so I could go with the all features with defaults. We did this back in chapter 3. So if you want to kind of walk through that again, go back to chapter 3 and watch the videos, because we walked through the whole discussion of virtual service accounts and managed service accounts and how kind of all that plays with the database engine and analysis services and so forth. So I'm going to choose the SQL Server feature installation. This is the one that gives us choices. I can choose to install the database engine, the integration services, the shared components, the client tools SDK, etc. Okay. So I'm just going to say next, and here's our options. Okay. Now you can clearly tell here we have integration services pre-installed. Okay. If this was blank, though, if there was not grayed out and it was for, you could check the box, this is how you would install integration services, right? Kind of. Okay. I kind of laugh at that. Yes, this will install the integration services service. It will not install the connection tools. It will not install the SQL Server data tools that you can use to create your packages and your projects and work with the tasks, okay? So this is part of it. Okay? Yes, you want to check the box for a fresh install to install the integration services, okay? However, that's probably not the only thing that you want to pick, okay? You probably also want to choose to install the SQL Server data tools. This is going to be the tool that we create packages, okay? So we'll talk about packages here in the next video. I'll come back and show you creating your tools. You also want to install the management tools, okay? And you finally want to install the client tools SDK. This adds the managed assemblies to the system so that you can do SSIS programming, which I would think many of us are going to be interested in those. So if you want to install just integration services, here's what you do. Check the box for integration services, SQL Server data tools, client tools SDK, and management tools. Some of you are probably going, wait a minute, Scott. What about the data quality client? We talked about data quality a little bit, okay? Well, if you're going to be working with DQS and the data quality services, absolutely. What about master data services down here, okay? Again, these are options that kind of go beyond the scope of our little 1 hour. Here's what the basics of integration services are. We cover these types of things again in the course 173, which is the full-blown integration services, right? But so these are your 4 key components for working with an integration services system. And by and large, these are things that you would install on every database engine, okay? Now, another question comes up to my mind. Should you install the database engine? Okay. So there's two ways to approach this. One, I could I'll write it over here. So option A, install just integration services, or option B, install SSIS and a database engine instance. Okay. Oh, come on, Scott. I'm kind of leaning over and my fingers are messed up there. I would probably opt for B. Okay. Remember, what chapter was it? Was it chapter 6 that we did the SQL Server agent? Maybe chapter 9. There's 17 chapters. I kind of get them in my head as I talk, and I get confused and forget. But we talked about the SQL Server agent, right? And do you remember what the role of the SQL Server agent is? The SQL Server agent is the job scheduler for the SQL Server world. So if you want to do things in integration services that you want to run on a scheduled event, then it's very common to also install the database engine when you install integration services, okay? So I would think it's not that it's rare to install just a plain old standalone SSIS installation, but most of the time you do want some type of a scheduler that has a nice interface to work with, and the SQL Server agent fits that bill. Not the only way. Those of you who know PowerShell or are good with the task scheduler in Windows, you know that we can kick off DTS packages, and we can do a whole lot of things that don't require the agent. However, the agent is a very simple, easy way to work. We can assign proxy accounts and all kind of fun things there. Okay. So given the choice, most of the time, I'm going to choose B. Okay. Okay. So we would choose integration services, and then really on the next page, we're going to set up the service account. Okay. And it's not going to let me because I already have mine installed. Okay. But let's talk about service accounts here for integration services really quickly. Okay. So for those of you on, let me make this a little bit bigger. Okay. Local dev machines, okay, or work groups. Okay, you're not on a domain. You're not adding this to a domain. Okay, you just want a local development machine. Maybe you're a member of a domain, but you don't have to necessarily make your integration services a member of that domain. That would be just a development machine. Or you're part of a work group, or it's a standalone laptop. Okay, you will use on Windows 7 and on Windows 2008 R2 and on Windows 2012. Win 8 and Windows 2012, you will use what's called a virtual service account for the integration services service. And that's perfectly fine. It's going to run NT services / MS DTS, what is it? DTS server 11.0, something like that. Sorry, it's running off the screen there, but that's going to be what's called a virtual service account. No passwords are going to be needed. You don't have to maintain it. Aha, I love this. Because in the old days, we would run this under the old, if you remember, local system, or you had the option to use network service, okay, which was the default for 2008 R2, 2005, okay? And the problem with this is those are very generic accounts, right? There are lots of services that can use network service and lots of services that can use local system. So they were not locked down accounts. They were not using the principle of least privilege, let's say. And by today, having this as a dedicated account that's a virtual service account, we know how to assign permissions and we know how to manage this, okay? No longer do we have to give the full network service write and read access to a given folder, for example. Okay. For those of you in the older systems here, Windows 2008, you're going to actually have to go back and use network service or local system. Okay. For those of you that want to make this part of a domain, though, want to be part of your Active Directory so that remote users can connect to your integration services instance and browse the catalog and such, then you will actually use what's called a managed service account. Okay. And a managed service account serves the exact same function as the virtual service account. It's just at the domain level. Okay, so it's going to give you that choice. It's going to default to the virtual service account here for those of you on a local dev machine, and that's what mine uses. And that's it. That's your installation options right there. There's really not a whole lot of choices that we have to make. Okay. Now, the last thing let's talk about, and I'm going to go ahead and leave this here. Let's just talk about configuring this and what happens post-install. After you've installed integration services, go ahead and go to the configuration tools and go to the SQL Server Configuration Manager. It's just in your SQL Server folder under the configuration tools. Okay. And I want you just to take a look at what's been installed. Let me finally pull it up here. So it has installed mine, and I actually have mine stopped, but you can see it right here. Okay. Integration Services 11.0. Notice that lack of a set of parentheses. Those services that have parentheses next to them, those have instances. Those are multi-instance possible services, right? We actually have, let's see, here's an instance of analysis services, and here's another instance of analysis services, right? Okay. By default, it will set up your service, your integration services, to start in automatic mode. Okay. And here we go with our virtual service account, MS DTS Server 11.0. Okay? You can change it, but there's really no reason to do so when you're just working on a local or a work group environment. I like this isolation would be the correct word. You are isolating just the integration services here. And you can start and stop that directly from here.